Hi there. Welcome to The Sacred Journey. The Sacred Journey is the program that reminds you that life is a wonderful adventure. Each and every experience we have is a unique and perfect opportunity for learning. I'm Joy St. Germain, and today's program, Creative Expression to Motivate Action. I am so delighted to have Linda Beers. She's a performing violinist, a teacher, a composer, a filmmaker, an artist, and a friend. And she is a very dear friend, but I am reading off of a card because she has been just so involved in so many things. I didn't want to forget anything, and near the end of our show we'll share with you Linda's latest endeavor. So Linda, welcome. We've been talking about doing this show for a while, so glad that we finally got to. I didn't want to leave out anything about who you are, what you do, because you have found some amazing ways to combine them all. And you have something very, very, very exciting. In what year was this?
Well, it was launched in 2017. Work began in 2016, but it was fully completed in 2017, in the spring of 2017.
Okay, you composed the music and wrote the, is it a script?
A
What
script,
would you call it?
that's
A script
right.
for a short film which was called Song of Spring. Nominated for Best Animated Film at Back in the Box, official selection of New York Short Film Festival, an official selection for Zero Film Festival.
That's right.
And we will be looking at it so we can show other people, and we'll also be sharing it at the end of this in a digital format so that the TV studio can do a better job than we can. But I wanted to watch it with you. But you don't go from birth to where you are without some kind of a history, some kind of interest. Something happened that made you want to do these things.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I grew up in a family that was very musical and also really loved animals. And one of my earliest memories was watching the Born Free movies when I was a little girl. I remember going to the drive-in movie, sobbing, listening to the music. And I think that was the first time I made a connection between, trying to save an animal and performing music. And I think that's just kind of stuck with me for a long time. And then I think it was back in the winter of 2016, a poet friend of mine, Joan Cantor, we have a program called Stringing Words Together. And we were preparing for an Earth Day program. And she was encouraging me to write my own piece. And I also, at the same time, happened to watch the Discovery Channel documentary Racing Extinction. And that's when everything kind of started happening. I was up all night. I had this vision of this movie, but at the time I was just called upon to write a piece of music, and that was the music for Song of Spring, which we performed in our Earth Day program.
And I remember that.
Yes.
It was beautiful.
Thank you. And it still was troubling me after that to make a movie out of it. But I think it was really that, in terms of answering your question about how this whole thing got started, it was like being in a family where we love music and animals, and I guess something was just brewing over a very long period of time.
Well, what a great way to use your creativity to inspire and motivate people to take some action.
Yes.
You lived the life that you talk about. I know how conscientious you are about the environment and the volunteer work you do. Tell me a little bit more about some of the places that I've heard you play, and maybe other people that support caring for the environment and the welfare of animals.
Well, I've played for the Sierra Club. We had our benefit concert back in May, and I also did a talk. They have like a monthly meeting that I had done, and I went and showed the movie, and I talked about what it was about and what motivated me to make the movie. I was also interviewed by the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and they had kind of an app that they were trying to get, I think, young people involved with their causes, and so I was interviewed for that. So.
Did you ever think that this idea, what is 2 minutes and 53 second
That's right.
film,
Yeah.
would gain such recognition and interest?
I really had hoped that people would just watch it. You know, I never envisioned like film festivals or anything like that. You know, because when I started it, I had never made a movie before. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And initially,
I remember
Yeah.
the idea just starting as a little
Right.
seed, and then all the work you did to make it a reality.
Yeah. It was quite the involved process, very exciting. And the kind of strange thing, or one of the strange things that happened, was that when it was first done, which was around May 2017, I put it up on Facebook and YouTube, and of course my friends and family all watched it and they loved it and said wonderful things about it, but it just felt like it wasn't going to progress much beyond that point, because there are a lot of people making, you know, doing projects and putting things up, and it just seemed like another one of those things to see on Facebook. So that's when I really got the idea to enter it into film festivals, because I thought, well, that's really, you know, going to open it up to other people who, you know, aren't in my group of friends or family, and maybe give me some ideas about other ways of putting it out there. So
Yeah, I remember every
Yeah.
time you got invited or accepted into a film festival, the excitement amongst our group of friends
Yes.
and your supporters, so this
Yeah.
is really wonderful.
Yeah.
It is a very old story. Chao Sheng worked in the fields like his father and his father's father. Every day he would look out over the valley for Hua Ling. He would see her sweeping away the leaves that had fallen through the night. Chao Sheng watched Hua Ling longingly. He breathed in her beauty and he swooned to the sway of her skirt as she swept back and forth. Chao Sheng loved Hua Ling and eagerly awaited the day they would marry. One day, Chao Sheng was working in the field. He looked out over the valley, but Hua Ling was not there. Day turned to night, and night turned to day. Chao Sheng became distraught, fearing that perhaps Hua Ling had married another. Every day he watched for her, but she never returned. One night, Hua Ling dreamed that she was floating and wandering into the mist over the mountain. In her dream, Hua Ling traveled over mountains and grasslands. The mist got thick as she seemed to be carried off, the soft soles of her feet floating over rocks and dirt. But soon, her feet were moving over sharp edges towards the sea. In her dream, Hua Ling faded away, her face and her body falling away like dust. But the dream became reality. Hua Ling was never returned. Chao Sheng destined to wait forever for her.
I'm sure the viewers were as moved as I was the first time I saw it, and the second and the third, and I'm sure I've seen it a dozen times. It's haunting, it's chilling, it's beautiful, it's powerful.
Thank you.
Sometimes I'm at a loss for words because it's so simple, but it's so complex when you think about what it really means. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it's using the metaphor of unrequited love to motivate action, because there are these two characters. There's Chao Shang, the farmer, and then the beautiful girl in the field, Hua Ling. And Chao Shang is watching her from afar, but never actually, you know, makes a proposal to her. And one day she just disappears, that she's not there.
Without knowing how he feels.
Yes, exactly. And he initially thinks maybe she married somebody else, and he's devastated. and he waits. You know, the day turns to night, night turns to day. She doesn't return. And then we see what really happened to her, that she was spirited away in a dream. She's carried over sharp edges and a mountain, and then eventually she turns to dust. And that to me represents what possibly happens to an animal when it's captured and it's, you know, disoriented, it's possibly tortured, and then it's killed. And it's really unpleasant to think about it. But that's
we
why,
have to address
yes,
that.
and that was actually the point to doing this as an animated film, and telling it as a folk tale, because watching that there are videos where you see these things happen, and I think that people get very shut down about it. They look at it, it's very upsetting, and they become,
Or they avoid looking.
they avoid looking, and they become paralyzed. I know that's happened to me at times, and I can imagine it's other people experience the same thing. So here I'm presenting in a way that maybe is more palatable, something that your psyche can handle, but you still get the point across that, you know, he didn't take action, and maybe if he had, this would not have happened to her. And so it's a warning in a way. If there's something you really care about, take action, do something about it, because you might lose your opportunity forever.
Beautifully said. Are there going to be any follow-up short films?
I'm considering it with our yoga teacher, Leslie Gordon. We had talked about, she teaches Yoga Nidra, and she had come up with a story that I thought would be adaptable into a short film. So that's kind of like one of those back burner things. It's still on my mind as a possible project.
This came from the back burner to
It did,
fruition.
yeah, yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You also have just launched some educational cards
Yes.
for the violin student.
Mhm.
Would you share a little bit about those?
Yes, this is very much in the works. This is kind of my first draft of them. And the way this came about was that I found that teaching my private students that I would very often say the same thing. This occurred over a number of years, for like 5 or 6 years. I kept a little notebook and just decided every time I said one of these gems that I would write it down. And my thought
Pearls
was,
of wisdom.
pearls
as
of
we call
wisdom,
them
yes,
in
yes.
education.
so I thought I would, write it down and say, here, just take this home and, keep these by your side, and, it'll be like I'm right there with you. And so it went on for a number of years, me writing these ideas down, and then it came time to actually make the cards, and in the process of this, I kind of learned how to draw and became an artist, and so
with Elizabeth Moss,
with
I believe.
Elizabeth Moss, that's right, yes, going to her classes, her art sanghas was very, very inspiring, very helpful. And so then it was a process of using an app on my phone actually to adapt them so that they would fit onto an actual card.
Could we look at a few of them?
Absolutely. So they are kind of tiny.
All right, I will read this. I think
Okay.
I can manage it.
Mhm.
The beauty of imperfection. Imperfections add to the mystique and personality of our instruments. The grain of the wood and the sheen of the varnish refract light like a fine crystal. How do your imperfections enhance the beauty of your music and your inner self? And here's some beautiful illustrations.
Mhm.
Why don't you read one?
Okay, I'm going to read the one that has, here's the image, I don't know if that can be seen. It says, water-soluble glue allows a violin to fall apart so that it can withstand seasonal climate changes without permanent damage. Can you let something in your life fall apart? How will you put the pieces back together again?
Getting very deep,
Yes,
not just
yes.
about technique.
That's right. Some of them are specifically about, like I have one that says, this is your moonshot, and it says around the border, it says practice, 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 practice. Because very often practicing,
Oh, I love the image.
teachers deal with practicing, or I think students experience teachers talking about practicing as a form of scolding. And rather than taking that approach and just saying, the lunar landing, the 50th anniversary was last July, and that was around when I was doing these drawings, and I just thought it's
Hence
like
the image.
your moonshot, yes. So we know what went into putting a man on the moon.
Now, do you envision students having a deck, perhaps teachers, a family, the parents of a child who's a violinist? What are some ways this could be used?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had amateur adult musicians be interested in them, other teachers. I just showed it to a colleague of mine in the Hartford Symphony over dinner. We were eating in Whole Foods and right before a concert, and I showed them to him, and he said, he rifled through them and said all the things I talk about. So, you know, I think there are different uses, and I think I've even heard people who are not violinists but play music, either they're singers or they play the piano, and they've asked me, well, you know, maybe you should even make up a deck that's more general music. So we'll
Great
see
idea.
what happens after this. So, and one of my favorite ones is a picture of a horse, and that was actually inspired by you, so that was very cool.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Not sure how, but thank you.
Yeah. From shamanism.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
So, and there's topos in one of them.
Yeah, our viewers might
Yes.
get to see him at the end of the show if time permits.
Uh-huh.
Well, he's such a handsome young man
Yes.
that maybe we can
Mhm.
show it for Topo Gigio
That's
for
right.
people of a certain age
Uh-huh.
that remember that from
The Ed Sullivan
cartoons.
Show. Yeah.
Yep. And I love how you just did. Is that called a sound hole? I don't really know what
It's called an F hole.
Okay.
And my thought was that you can just about see the sound post in it if you're looking at the card up close.
Okay.
And my thought was looking inside, because that's part of what the cards are about, is looking inside of you. So you're looking inside the violin.
All right. Let me get my card. I need to add
Okay.
philosopher, psychologist. That's why I loved these. I thought there was going to be an obvious, like, okay, this string, this note, this hand position, this whatever, and they're not. They're really about, well, in education we call it the whole learner.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are some more specific things
Well, of
to
course,
playing the
yeah.
violin that, you know, pretty much a violinist would understand, but that's not entirely what it's about. It's really the whole student.
I think that is so important. And we'll be sure to share your contact info at the end, so if anybody has questions about any of this.
Yes.
Now, we just kind of said, oh, you play for the Hartford Symphony. That's an amazing honor.
Yes.
And you, before that, played in other symphonies. Tell us a little bit more about your personal and professional journey.
Well, I went to school in Boston, and after I completed school, I worked as a freelance musician and also had a private teaching studio.
Always, though, in violin?
In violin,
Okay.
yes, yes. And I played in the Boston Lyric Opera Orchestra, and I would substitute in the Boston Ballet Orchestra and the Boston Classical Orchestra. And in 1997, I auditioned and got into the Hartford Symphony Orchestra, still living in Boston, and I would go back and forth. And after 5 years, I, got tired of the Mass Pike.
I'll bet.
Yes.
But you had a little teeny eco-friendly car.
Yeah, well, later on, I got the eco-friendly car.
Because I remember
Yes.
a little good on gas,
Yes.
hybrid-y kind of thing.
Yes.
So I'm pointing that out, that whenever possible you do exactly what you feel is
Yes.
important for the environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. So after 5 years of back and forth, I decided to move to Hartford, and at that point, or I moved to Simsbury actually, and I became a certified public school music teacher, and I teach in Simsbury, and I continue.
What grade level?
I teach in elementary grades 4 through 6, strings, violin, viola, cello, and bass, and orchestra. And I also have a private teaching studio right here in Avon.
Where we are.
Where we are, that's right, you're right in my studio. And I teach both Suzuki and traditional violin lessons here.
What is Suzuki?
Suzuki.
Everybody understands, I almost said
Yeah.
whatever that math thing is, Sudoku or whatever
Yeah,
that
right.
is. Suzuki method. Everybody's heard of it. Nobody knows what it is unless you've been involved in it.
Well, you can probably tell from the name that it's originally a Japanese method, Shinichi Suzuki, and he believed in the mother tongue theory, which is that children can learn to play their instruments in a similar way to the way they learn to play to speak their own mother tongue language. that you start with maybe one word at a time, like mama or dada, and you're hearing it pronounced correctly with the correct, local pronunciation, and you're in a positive home environment, and Suzuki students learn to play their instruments by ear. Listening is very important, and the parent is very important. The parent is the home teacher, so the parent receives training, and we talk about the Suzuki triangle.
So, wait a minute, the parents also learn to play the violin
They do,
to teach them?
yes.
That's a remarkable undertaking
Yes, it is.
and level
yeah.
of commitment and dedication
That's
as a parent.
absolutely right, yes.
Wow.
Because the parent facilitates practicing, obviously is driving the child to all of their musical events, and taking care of instruments and buying the music and making sure that the child's listening and practicing. And
Wow. Now, what age starts at the Suzuki method?
Personally, I start between the ages of 4 and 6, although there is Suzuki education, early childhood education. I've taken a course with that as well, and that starts at birth, basically, 0 to 3. So teachers now 0
You
to
did
3.
say 0.
0,
Okay.
yes. I've had a child as young as a month old in one of those classes. And so they're really literally growing up in Suzuki in the mother's pouch, and yes.
They're not handling a violin, they're getting used to sound and
Yes,
music.
yeah,
and,
it's not
okay.
not violin. It's dancing and singing and drumming.
And that's still Suzuki method?
And that's the
Okay.
Suzuki method, yes. And the feeling is that you go through that course and then you're ready to take the violin or piano or one of the other Suzuki instruments.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, we have about a minute left.
Mhm.
And we are going to show your film
Mhm.
in high detail through Nutmeg TV at the end of our program. But what do you want to be sure that our viewers take away from all of this?
I think it's really important that everyone has something to contribute. To me, climate change, global warming is the biggest crisis facing us right now beyond anything else going on in the world. And I know that there's a
agree.
lot going on. And you might be thinking, well, I don't have any skills that seem applicable to, saving the environment, but everybody has talents. And I think hopefully I'm demonstrating that, as a musician, I can't really talk about science. I don't really know enough about it to speak about that. And very often I'm too busy to do like protests or go down to Washington, something like that. But, I can make a movie. I can compose a piece of music. I also feel like with my teaching that I'm creating these, as Suzuki said, noble human beings. And I know that they'll go out and do great things in the world. So everybody has something that they can share. That's going to be a really important contribution.
What a nice way to put it. And I thank you so much for sharing your gifts and yourself with our viewers. And everybody can do something. It just has to matter. Thanks for joining us on The Sacred Journey. We'll catch you next time.